Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by David Calvert, author of Hurtling Towards a Home, A Story of Hope. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's a great honor being on the show, and I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to get started?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Probably the biggest takeaway I learned from my experience was not being afraid to ask questions from other people in the industry, just simply because I got so much help, so many answers, so many different people who pointed me to people who could help me answer these questions to actually find the way that worked for me to get my book published, finding editors, all of those different things, finding voice talent for future audiobooks. All of these resources I found just by going into groups or LinkedIn and actually asking questions from people who were also authors. And, most of the time I've never found an author who was not helpful or wanting to support a fellow author with some advice and information. So that'd be my advice.
Excellent. And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think a lot of it's just the questions, or, if you've never done it before, is okay, who do I ask? Where do I start? What publishers should I reach out to for my book? Because there's so many publishing options, such as, the traditional publishers, then there's the hybrid publishers like yourself, and then there's self-publishing, and there's just so much out there. So it's just kind of finding those questions and then finding where you need to reach out to, and then actually going out there and submitting your work to those publishers, depending on which route you go, which kind of ties into my first answer as far as not being afraid to ask questions, because it was definitely a huge learning experience trying to figure out how to do those particular tasks to get started.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Actually, probably one of the best things that I did was started a Facebook community behind my book launch, and invited a bunch of friends and people that I knew that were into the genre, and then had them invite their friends, so on and so forth. And then I would actually host Facebook Live events where I would just talk about subjects related to the book, subjects related to the genre, and then I actually had leading up to the launch, about a month before the launch, I actually had the gentleman who wrote the foreword for my book. We actually did a Facebook Live where he actually read the foreword on live, and then we answered questions. And then I announced like a mini pre-order option through there as well. So I actually had the author of the foreword read, and then we talked about the book. We talked about the history of where I came up with the idea. So we had a full engagement where we did a live session with people that were fans in that genre, and it turned some really good results because we got that engagement. Everyone was getting excited, and then I was like, okay, well, now that the live is about over, here's the link for the pre-order, and it worked out really well for me.
How many sales did you generate based off the Facebook Live?
It was about 20 pre-orders.
Wow.
And then some people didn't pre-order. They actually, it wasn't huge, but a lot of the people ordered after the pre-order kicked in. I don't know why there was the wait there, but we probably in total over 100 between the pre-orders and the sales, because people were like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to do the pre-order. And, they reached out to me because I had an email list going as well where I kind of kept people up to date on everything.
Those are actually pretty good stats because social media is hit or miss. It's really utilized more for brand awareness. And when you're able to take a Facebook Live and get 20 initial pre-orders and then 100 total, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah. When we spent, me and the gentleman who wrote the foreword, we actually spent probably about 3 to 6 months doing build up, inviting people into the group, doing like little events here and there. And that build up kind of helped. So it was kind of a culmination of all the work that we did after the fact. So I think, if you just throw up a Facebook Live and that's it, you probably wouldn't have got the result, just simply because a lot of people wouldn't have been there to see it. But we had, we sent out invites, we sent out, notifications through social media, like, hey, don't forget to sign up for the Facebook Live. So we were really pumping the promotional aspect of it out of, ahead of it, so people knew it was coming.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Oh, gosh. My favorite book, I would have to say, was actually The Creative Curve by Alan Gannett. And it actually really opened me up to the idea of going out there to actually, I always thought like, I'm not a writer. I'm not like this name, like a James Patterson or something like that. I'm not an established writer. And by reading that book and reading about how creativity works, it really opened me up to finally say, okay, you know what? I don't have to be an established name to be a writer. I just have to be willing to take my ideas and put them on paper. And I actually got to meet Alan and talk with him about that after the fact as well. But that's also where my idea for my podcast came from, that we were talking about before we came on, was actually from those aha moments. I actually read that in his book, and that inspired me also to start my podcast. So I think that's a good book for anyone who's sitting there kind of on the fence, who thinks like, well, I might be able to do something, but I don't know. I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't think I'm creative enough. I think that's a really good book to read to kind of teach people how creativity works and to better understand that they can be creative. They don't have to be like this, certain type of person to actually do something like writing a book.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote is actually by Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author, and it's, the only way to discover the limits of what's possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And, that one also kind of speaks to what I just mentioned, was that, by, going out there, even though I didn't see myself as a writer per se, or as someone who could sell books, I went out there and did it anyway. And then next thing you know, I'm selling books with my name on them. I'm signing books at book signings and actually doing something that I thought, a couple of years ago was absolutely impossible.
It's a pretty cool feeling, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't trade it for a world.
Well, David, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best ways to find me online is to just simply go to my website. It's creativecalvert.com. It has all of my social media links, as well as links to my books that I've written, ways to get in touch with me, information about my podcast. So anything you want to know, how to get in touch with me, how to find out what I'm working on, it's all there on the site.
David, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, and thank you again for having me on your show.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.